Hey Warpugs, so today we're going to be checking out a request from a name I'm not going to say on YouTube, for obvious reasons. This is Do or Don't the Imperial Guard. This is by PancreasNoWork. Now, I absolutely love PancreasNoWork, primarily because I like people that do lore who can make me change my mind, who can actually... Because I'm not one of those people that just hard sells into something, except for my, hatred of the Tau. I will never hard sell any harder than that. But when it boils down to it, I like it when people can present an argument in a way that makes me change my mind, and it presents the information in a way that I can actually relate to. PancreasNoWorks does this very, very extremely well, and I absolutely love his videos because of that reason. The last video he did was on the Tamriel Great War, which is Elder Scrolls. If you know anything about the Great War, people have been dunking on the Emperor of that setting during that time frame forever. Saying he was weak, saying he was ineffective, saying that he gave up the war and took a terrible treaty, which the treaty was terrible, don't get me wrong. But that he did it for no reason because the Empire was about to turn the fight around. After listening to PancreasNoWorks talk about that, I changed my mind on that. So I'm hoping that you guys get as much out of this as I do. As far as learning, as far as what you absolutely, feel about, I hope my lore videos do the same for you, to be honest with you. Speaking of which, if you guys haven't seen the new lore channel, it is up and running. I am steadily porting my lore videos over to that channel, so the algorithm will stop beating my lore videos to a bloody pulp. Also, SCP lore is now coming to the Old Man Lore Stories and Theories channel, and I will be uploading that probably as soon as I get done checking this out. In fact, you guys may hear a sound effect, which is going to be kind of cool because I have been working on this thing. I have had to learn a whole new editor to do this. I wanted to present the lore in a very particular fashion, and I think that I am happy with what I have done. The first lore video is going to be a basic introduction to the character that, because I always do characters, the characters that I portray in this. I always do characters when I'm doing lore. Either the Commissar, this one, it is Agent Carl Spender, and any X-Files fan will know exactly what I'm talking about. So I can't wait for that to come out. I'm going to be releasing that on Patreon within the day, and I'm also going to be doing a premiere on it on my lore channel, Old Man Lore Stories and Theories, and that's going to be probably on Thursday that I'm going to be releasing that. I'd really like to thank everyone who has contributed to my knowledge base for this, especially creators like the Vulcan, SCP Illustrated, well, Mr. Illustrated now, and the Exploring series, Dr. Bob, Dr. Cimarron. There was a lot. It is a step outside of my wheelhouse, but I'm happy to do it, and I'm happy to have fun with it. And I'm hoping I contribute something to everything that goes on with SCP when I start to release these videos in my own small way. But check out my lore channel below. Check out all those links in the description down below. I'm really trying to get something done here. Until then, though, we're going to be watching PancreasNoWork's video on the Imperial Guard. And I hope you guys are going to enjoy this as much as I know I am, because the Guard is one of my personal favorite... Well, it is not it is my favorite faction. I love everything about the Guard. And if you gave me $2,000 and told me to build a tabletop army, it would be Guard. Let's get into it.
Something nice about the Warhammer 40k factions is that they're all pretty goddamn spectacular in one way or the other.
True.
Like the Space Marines. I know some people look at this video and thought I hate the Space Marines, but I don't. They're badass super soldiers designed by a god, and they're awesome. Humanity's finest through and through. Or the Eldar. They're remnants of a dying species that once ruled the stars and are still a force to be reckoned with. The Orcs, the Tau, the Tyranids, everyone has something that makes them go above and beyond the average person.
Well, I can say one thing about the Tau. They go well with a baked potato.
But you know what? Sometimes that's not what you want. There's an appeal unique to being the average Joe and Jane, the everyday men and women just doing their part to get by in the world. They're not particularly special, they don't have supreme plot armor, and they're not the best of the best in anything, really. But god damn it, they fight their damned hardest, and it's all the more special when they win because of it. When they show that just because some big bug monster is designed to be the ultimate killing machine doesn't mean that it's unbeatable. So are you interested in playing as the true essence of humanity? Do you enjoy when the regular people of the galaxy go against the worst it has to offer and tell it to stick it where the sun don't shine?
Yes.
You, my friend, you want the Imperial Guard.
Yes.
The Imperial Guard is what happens when you need more bodies than most planets have people to fight in your war effort. I wish I could give you a grand operatic backstory for these guys, but I can't. They're just people like you and me against the forces of hell and worse. The Solar Auxilia from 30k that would eventually become the Guard, while badass, were supposed to be secondary support units for the main force of the Space Marines.
True.
But you know what? All this makes them even more appealing. The average man performs so well even compared to the invincible Space Marines that the Imperium was like, shit man, make these guys the main force. And yeah, I know that part of the Guard coming into being was that the Imperium feared the Space Marines going rogue again, but at the end of the day, the Guard wouldn't have come into being if it couldn't be competent on its own. They're the badass dregs of humanity, and they fight horrors beyond time and space, and they win.
I actually did a full video on the origins of the Guard and why they became what they were. When the Space Marine legions were spreading out, when the Great Crusade was underway, eventually it got to the point where there simply weren't enough Space Marines. There just wasn't enough to continue the push forward in all theaters with just Space Marines. So the I can't remember what the name of it was. It was now the Solar Auxilia. That was from Terra itself, and there goes the SCP video. That was from Terra itself, but it did have Auxilia in its name, and it eventually became the Army. And after the heresy was over, the entire structure of the Army was broken down because the Army was both the Imperial fleet and the Imperial Army together. It was all considered the Imperial Army. It was all underneath one command structure.
At the end of the day, that's all the background you need. So why pick them? Well, like I said, every army in 40k has something special about them that makes them stand above the ordinary person. But what makes the Guard special is that they don't really have anything like that. They're the everyday men and women who are forced to fight to live, and honestly, that's something that makes them entirely unique in the setting. I love the Eldar and Elves in general, but even the Guardians, the average Eldar forced to fight to defend their craft worlds, still aren't quite the same as the Guard. Militia or not, they're still effectively immortal elves that have forever to learn how to fight and survive. But the Guard is just humanity. You more than likely can never be a Custodes, but you sure as shit could be a Guardsman. I'm fucking diabetic, and I could still probably be a Guardsman. We'll take anyone. This makes them more relatable than anyone in the setting. You can relate to the Space Marines. You aren't a child super soldier fighting demons from hell as part of your job description, but you can be damn sure you can relate to the guy shitting himself behind a machine gun while mushrooms built for war tear your tanks in half. Whenever a Guard book comes out, you can relate to just about every character in it. From Caiaphas Cain caught weight out of his depths in the worst of situations to Gaunt the Tanith first and only grimly persevering, there's no one in the Guard that you can't connect to in some way. Even on the tabletop, there's something about knowing each of those minis on the field is just an average person forced to fight that makes them special. And it's all the more awesome.
I vastly approve the Stellaris soundtrack in this.
When they do win because of this. When the Space Marines win, it's like, well, yeah, of course they do. They're all Master Chief. But you throw an average guy against an army of 4 different Satans and he wins? Now that's something special. Whenever a member of the Guard does something amazing, it's even more awesome because of the universe he lives in. There's a group called the Kasserkin, which are the Cadian Guard Regiment's elite units to give the basics of it. One of them was either part of an Inquisitor's bodyguard or just happened to be nearby for whatever reason. And this motherfucker scared the Inquisitor. Keep in mind, this guy's entire job is to deal with demons from hell on a regular basis and had fought against Space Marines in the thrall of one of the Chaos Gods. And this Kasserkin scared him. Kasserkin also helped.
I wound up yanking. I need a longer AV cord because this thing sticks out really far, and I just yanked it out of my head for the second time today. It's happening more and more. I need to get a longer AV cord for this. But I really like these headphones, guys. By the way, thank you, Patreons, for this.
Helped save the Inquisitor's life when a possessed guy lost control of the demon inside of him. What an edgy sentence. By jumping on top of it and stabbing it with a plain old knife. Space Marines wish they could be that cool. Beyond them being exceptional in their normalcy, there's a Guard army for just about everyone lore-wise. Do you want stereotypical Soviet-Russian charges where the only strategy is clog the enemy guns with your bodies? Guard has you covered. Do you want actual Soviet tactics where there's some serious brain power put into the war effort, it's just the casualties aren't avoided if they're the most efficient route to victory? Guard has you covered. World War I era trench warfare and unrelenting stoicism in the face of defeat? Of course the Guard has you covered. ODSTs, you know the Guard has those. The Guard also makes frequent use of heavy armor because tanks are awesome, thus making them one of the few factions in 40k to realize that actually, it turns out tactics and efficient use of your war machine is really effective, instead of screaming some war cry and charging headfirst into a machine gun nest because the first part of becoming a space marine is removing your self-preservation instincts. Beyond that, the Guard is the faction for people who don't want to be on the losing side in the grand scheme of things. Now, from the amount of casualties the Guard suffers, you might think I'm being a bit of an idiot here. And I am, because the Guard suffers manpower losses like my Pancreas suffered beta cell losses. But the thing is, unlike my Pancreas, there will always be more Guardsmen. The Imperial Guard is an army trillions strong, and it's only ever getting bigger because the Imperium requires planets to give a certain number of soldiers to the Guard as a tithe. Yes, I said tithe. Tithe, motherfuckers. Complain at me in Discord all you want. You can't untithe the word tithe. Anyways, sure, some individual armies like the Tanith First and Only may be on a fixed lifespan, but the Guard as a whole isn't going anywhere no matter the losses. It doesn't matter.
The reason the Tanith First and Only is on a really short lifespan is because it was the only regiment raised on the planet before it went boom. For the most part, that's what you're looking at there. Gaunt's Ghost. If you're looking to get into Warhammer 40k, I highly recommend Gaunt's Ghosts. You will like that series.
No matter who they're fighting, on a battle-by-battle basis, they'll be equipped with almost equal numbers to whatever they fight at worst. There may be more Tyranids and Orcs than there are Guardsmen in total, but on a battle-by-battle basis, they're on relatively equal footing. Guard also has just straight up the most enjoyable books. I admit I'm probably biased because I've read more Guard books for 40k than anything else, but by God do I love them. The Gaunt books, Caiaphas Cain, I love and keep mentioning them because they're so fucking good. Interestingly, the Guard is also closer to the moral good end of the spectrum as far as 40k goes. Now, I'm not saying it's a good guy faction, where everyone involved is just a big damn hero who's always riding out to save the day. They're part of the fascist, totalitarian hellscape that is the Imperium, and if you put them in, say, Star Wars, they'd look like total monsters. But because...
This is true, and shameless plug for Star Wars vs. 40k by a fan with too much time on that regard. Yeah, they would be absolute monsters. By any metric.
They're the average men and women fighting for their beliefs and, more importantly, survival. This gives them a bit more of a humane edge. Not great, because if I don't clarify, people get the wrong idea, but compared to super soldiers slaughtering thousands because they can, or the secret police nuking entire worlds, the guy screaming for the Emperor because it's all he knows in the face of certain death is kinda hard to hate on for being evil. Hell, depending on how awful you think the Imperium is, he may not even realize what a shithole he lives in, so you can add a little bit of culture-wide brainwashing to make him even more sympathetic. It's also fun to play against the Guard. It's hard to be mad at them because A, the Guard is a pretty respectable army to see in the tabletop, and B, you'll always score a decent amount of kills against a Guard army, so you'll never feel like it was a slaughter even if you lose. And with that foreshadowing of the Guard's negatives, let's go to their tabletop positives. Remember those numbers I mentioned? Yeah, that reflects in their rules. You're going to be having more troops on the field than most armies, depending on how you build your own. It's possible to lean more into the infantry side of things and have waves upon waves of disposable schmucks drown the enemy in bodies. Like I said before, with the potential exceptions of the Tyranids and the Orcs, the Guard are always going to outnumber people on the battlefield. And while one lasgun might not be the best weapon, 100 of them is pretty damn good. So if you face the Guard, don't think you're just going to be getting free kills with zero effort against them. Is there an objective you really need to take? Well, your numbers have your back. Even if you go for more expensive stuff, compared to other armies, your stuff is still dirt cheap in point cost. You'll rarely be in a situation where you're desperately trying to fit one more unit in because you'll be just over the point limit by including it. You're very much a ranged army, so to get the most out of the Guard, stay far away and shoot at the morons who think swords are good in the 41st millennium. That being said, if you have some Ogrins on the field, then people are going to regret going into the charge thinking they've got the game in the bag once they close the gap, before a not ogre rips their commander in half anyways. Of course, you can lean more into a mechanized build as well. Tanks aplenty, and each of them is pretty effective at its role. Sure, Guard tanks might not be the best things in the game stat-wise, but as far as what you get for points, you can't really get anything better than the old Lehman Russ tank, named after the Primarch of the shittiest chapter ever. He's an alright guy though. Also, the Basilisk. Remember when everyone was shitting themselves over the Tau railgun? You know how that railgun had 72 inches of range? The Basilisk has a range of 240 inches. You were never not in Basilisk range. And while it doesn't hit nearly as hard as the railgun, it still packs a decent punch and can come in a unit of 3. Horde armies will learn to fear the Basilisk. Valkyries can control the sky while the tanks hit them from below. And of course you have the mighty Baneblade. Anything in front of it, you just assume it's not going to be there.
I see, Creed. I'm wondering if you pulled all this out of a potted plant.
their next turn. Just forget about it. But the true power of the Guard comes from their flexibility. The vehicles they wield might not be the best in any particular role, but they're decent enough all-rounders. Sure, you aren't as tough as the Necrons, but you're tough enough for your point cost. Sure, you don't hit as hard as the Eldar, but once again, you're cheap enough that you can toss more tanks freely into the fray and they'll still perform very well. On top of that, when their vehicles are backed up properly by a force of infantry, there's very little on the battlefield the Guard isn't able to do. Sure, your opponent could focus on wiping out your infantry and making sure you don't get any objectives, but that just means the firing line of basilisks in the background is going to mulch them. And if they focus all their effort on the vehicles, then they aren't capturing shit, and with the 500 lasguns pointed at them, one of those guardsmen is going to get a kill. You have a tool for every occasion. It may not be the best tool, but you have something that can get the job done alright, and sometimes that's all you need. Combine this with the buffs units like commissars can give to a unit, and you can get a level of synergy that makes anything the Guard's path wish it was fighting something less terrifying, like Tyranids. And if nothing else, the Guard are part of the Imperium. If there's one particular aspect of the Guard you find just isn't to your liking, ally with someone else and you can patch that hole right up. The reverse is
I would be my army would be artillery heavy, mechanized. I would be having a lot of fun singing the song of my people to anybody that played with me.
Is also true. Any weaknesses in the Space Marines, Sororitas, or the Mechanicus can pretty easily be filled up by the Guard. Also, Knight Commander Pask. He's not as good as he used to be from my understanding of the rules, or at least he doesn't have nearly as many varied rules. But my advice, if you're ever playing against someone who hasn't played the Guard before, play Pask. They will quickly learn to target him first in the future, because if they don't, they're going to watch their army turn into smoke. Oh, and Slime Arbo. Yeah, I had to mention the funny meme, man. Look at him. How could you not think he's badass? Overall, if you want a force of meat shields taking bullets for the big guns behind them, you want the Guard. Wait a minute, haven't I heard that one before? But what sucks about the Guard? Well, lore-wise, there's a few negatives to be wary of. On a grand scale, like I said, yeah, the Guard is never going to be losing because there's trillions of the brass-balled bastards. But in individual battles, yeah, those casualty reports are going to be hard to read. Whenever the Guard shows up to a fight, a whole lot of them are going to die, more so than usual for 40k. It gets rough out there for the humble guardsmen, I won't lie to you. What makes it worse for the Guard is that if it's a big event where every faction is involved, that means the Space Marines are going to be involved, which means the ultimate glory is going to go to them, not the humble guardsmen on the ground. Expect a token mention along the lines of, while the Guard heroically died in droves to distract someone, the Space Marines went and did the important shit. The Guard are the grunts through and through, and their role in lore is often to catch bullets with their faces so someone important doesn't have to. They also lose more than any other Imperial force, excepting perhaps the Sisters of Battle for what is almost certainly fetishistic reasons. Yeah, the Guard holding Katie until it was literally falling apart beneath them and then fighting just a little bit longer until they suffocated to death was undeniably badass. But at the end of the day, that's still a loss. Cadia blew up. Their job after all is to die gloriously until the big guns can take the credit for something. The Guard get their Purple Heart and the Space Marines get a demigod back. Additionally, the Guard gets the bottom of the barrel assignments compared to everyone else. Space Marines and Sisters of Battle will be out purging demons while the Guard is busy doing garrison duty. Now these lower-key stories can make for very fun and enjoyable narratives, so it isn't necessarily a flaw. But if you always want to be the center of attention, then the Guard might not be for you. Especially if by center of attention you don't mean directly in the middle of the enemy's attack path. Get used to being the meat shield. Seriously, I can't emphasize this one enough. Also, as with every other faction, you get less lore than the Space Marines, which means that
which is annoying.
The Guard has dozens of unique factions from Talarn to Krieg to Cadia to the Vestroyan Firstborn and more. They're not getting nearly as much attention as they should be. In fact, if it isn't Katakan, Cadia, or Kriegers, they probably aren't getting any attention. Have you ever heard of the Terex Guard? I haven't before I started working on this video. They seem pretty cool, but their last update seems to be around 10 years before I was born. That's just about all I got for the narrative downsides, because in my opinion...
And there's so many unique elements that you never have heard of. There's so many cool ones that you never heard. The Harakani Warhawks. I mean, you have to dig to find out information about some of these regiments that are just insane. Morty Iron Guard is one of my favorite regiments, flat out. And you mention it to some people, they just look at you because all they've ever heard of is Krieg, Cadia. Maybe they've heard of the Valhallan, but maybe they've heard about the Vestroyan Firstborn. But yeah.
And the Guard are doing pretty well in that department, but they more than make up for it with their tabletop flaws. Do you think that their units are so cheap because they're just so cool that Games Workshop couldn't resist making them cheap? Not at all. They cost little because looking at them funny makes them explode. Point for point, the Guardsmen are good at everything from durability to damage. Purely looking at stats, however, yeah, they're gonna get obliterated on the battlefield. Anti-infantry weapons are gonna powderize your soldiers, anti-armor will do to your tanks what those hyper-realistic Minecraft mods do to a computer. What the? And with the exception of Ogrins, they aren't good in melee if you aren't buffing them with with supporting units, and even then they aren't exactly great. Sure, the Guard can take Fire Warriors or Guardians in melee, but that scenario should never come up because the Guard performs much better at range, and if an Eldar or Tau player is purposely putting those units into melee, then they need to find another army. The average Guardsman also isn't particularly brave either, because he's been assigned a squirt gun and t-shirt and told to go kill God. I mean, I can't blame him. I'd run from these battles the first chance I fucking got. Just something to keep in mind when you're in the thick of things. If you specialize in either a wave of conscripts or a wave of tanks, your opponent will not only know exactly what to play to counteract this, but will more than likely be able to do so with relative ease, given that their units are some of the weakest in the game compared to other factions. Now, while I did mention that it's possible for you to counteract this by having certain units act as firing magnets while others do an important job elsewhere, it's entirely possible for this to fail spectacularly. The Guard works best when all parts of it are performing in tandem, and when one part breaks, the entire thing can come crashing down. Imagine this scenario. A Guard player is fighting an Eldar player. The Guard player could have the Commissars and Priests giving the correct buffs for the situation, the firing line of artillery is perfectly set, and the foot soldiers are where they need to be for maximum efficiency. The Guard player can very much roll the Eldar player over here, but here's the thing. While a balanced Guard army can be the most effective, it's also easy to bring to a halt once things stop going so well and the right units are taken out. If the Eldar player takes down your characters with Rangers, sends fire dragons to destroy the artillery, and manages to get some Wraith Guard into melee range with the Guardsmen, you're in deep shit. Even if only one of those things goes off successfully, the Guard player may still very well be crippled for the rest of the game, as it doesn't have what it needs to properly perform. And because the Eldar units are so specialized, they're perfectly suited to taking down your key units if they play the right ones. This isn't just the Eldar though. Every faction is going to have something able to cause this scenario to happen if they get the chance. If you play Guard, you need to know two things. One, what's best to throw into line of fire to take hits for something else, and two, at some point you're going to have to figure out which vital unit is the least vital one to sacrifice. You need to play defensively with your infantry to win if you don't want to take casualties for the big guns, and no matter what, a lot of people are going to die here. The Baneblade is tough, but the avatar of a war god is going to cleave it in half if you don't make sure there's enough cannon fodder in front of it.
This is insanely true.
On rules, well, your Guardsmen are cheap in Warhammer points. In real life money, prepare to take out a loan or 10 if you want to play these guys. Let's look at their start collecting box. Honestly, I think for what it gives you, it's one of the best ones available, maybe even the best.
I love that Commissar mini. I really, really do. My wife started looking at Commissar hats for me, guys.
Of maybe the Commissar, you can always use more of the units that are in it. The problem is you're going to need to buy at least 5 of them for a functioning Guard force. Mechanized or infantry, numbers is the name of the game here. You can't buy a few boxes of these guys like with the Space Marines or Custodes and call it a day. You need a lot of everything. And this only gets worse the more you look at it. Want that unit of 3 Basilisks I mentioned earlier? $200 after taxes, please and thank you. This also means a lot of time spent assembling models, which means a lot of time spent painting and transporting models. The Guard is a very intensive area to play, arguably more so off the tabletop than on it. And a lot of these models are so wonderfully out of date. Their vehicles are fine, I'll grant. Even a World War I tank designed by stapling a turret to the top of a tractor can age well, and the standard Cadians are okay. They're not an atrocity to look at, but you can definitely tell they're aging, especially compared to Primaris Marines with the new Eldar units.
And see, I wish I was able to paint. I wish, like, I was never a good painter, guys, but with my hand being the way it is, painting is just out of the question. It kind of, like, I see paint jobs like this, and they look so good. Like, these minis look really, really good. I wish I could do stuff like this. I really, really do. But that's neither here nor there.
Maybe not as bad as the Tyranids are, but it's close. But pretty much all the characters are not only aging, but in fine caster metal. And to really see an example of the Guardsmen aging poorly, look at the Catechins.
Yeah.
This is painful to look at. Bring back the Red Terror, please, I beg of you. I'm entirely certain this man isn't a gene stealer in disguise. And this is supposed to be an army of Rambos. I know Sylvester Stallone can make some pretty fun...
What happened to his face?
Funny faces sometimes, but for the love of God, he never looked like this. And you know how I mentioned that in the lore there's all sorts of armies that the Guard has? Well, on the tabletop, they can go suck a fire hose because you don't get them. You get Catechans and Cadians, and I guess if you really want to be generous, the Tempestus Scions. Now, I'm sure some bright soul in the comments will be going, oh, quit whining, you've got Krieg too. And yeah, Krieg's there with a single infantry kit for $60.
Right.
Or you can get 16 horses, the finest Krieg has to offer, off the Forge World website for $500, or 15 infantrymen and 3 artillery pieces for $600. Let me just check, and yep, Eldar Titan's gonna be less than $400. Let me just make sure you're understanding this. A Titan is less than some horses. And there used to be some pretty solid diversity in the Guard like Talarn, but unfortunately those don't sell like Space Marines and Starship Troopers do, so go fuck yourself, valued customer. I mean, what else can I say? If you want some variety in your Guard army, you have 3 options. Find out-of-date models from secondhand sellers, get really good at kit bashing and risk Games Workshop executing you for bringing in a micrometer of third-party material, or spend
Right.
your life savings on resin. And there's the basics of the Guard for you. An army with a lot of character to it that can perform very well despite being made of squishy humans, but keep in mind that it's by no means invulnerable. When played well, you can bring the full force of Germany in the first half of World War II to the table. When played poorly, you can bring the full force rout of Germany in the second half of World War II to the
There you
table.
go.
But you'll be having a fun time doing it no matter what. Thank you, of course, to my channel members. You are the guardsmen to my Imperium, generously sacrificing your wallet so that I may continue on my quest for glory and YouTube infamy. Thank you all
Yes.
for watching, and take care out there.
All right, let's take a look, because he always has a joke at the end.
I'm not going to play it because I don't want to steal it, but go listen to
Oh,
XX by
yes.
Stringstorm if you somehow haven't yet. It's a
Yes.
seriously awesome song about the Guard, proving once again that they're the best human faction in 40k, which makes it all the more funny that it was written for Remy Down Under Gaming's Modern Arma clusterfucks. In fact, go watch that too. Why are you still here? Are you expecting a joke? I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm running out of funny for the script. I want to bang Carl Franz, Marathi's hot, I'm diabetic. There, I hit all the major notes. Now go away, I'm busy painting ogres.
What?
Well, this video did well.
What? All right, guys. So yes, one thing about the Imperial Guard. Oh wow, why is that popping up there? Get that out of there. There we go. One thing about the Imperial Guard is, when people start insulting the Guard, I only have there's your average Imperial Guardsman is going to be fighting. If he's fighting something in the, as far as an Eldar goes, he's fighting something that has, in most cases, an average of a century to several centuries, in some cases, an average of combat experience. Actual in-battle experience and on-campaign experience. Centuries. Your average guardsman is going to have, maybe, possibly a year? Maybe, if that, average on campaign, actually on a battlefield experience. In the case of an orc, they're fighting something literally bred for war. In the case of the Necrons, you're fighting living metal, which at one point was fighting gods. And of course, chaos is chaos. The Guard is my favorite faction because, flat out, they're the ones that are going to hold the line. And they're holding the line against essentially horrors. Absolute horrors without exception. That's why they're my favorite. Now, I do have other factions I like. I absolutely love the Sisters of Battle. I really like the Space Marines, but I always like the Guard best of all because they're the humans. They're the humans of the setting, and they're the most, for me, like he was saying, their stories are the most fun. I can relate to an 8-foot-tall murder machine in some ways, but I really relate to the actual people in the story, the regular person in the story. All that being said, guys, subscribe if you haven't already. Go check out PancreasNoWork. Subscribe to him if you haven't already. Leave a like and a comment. Check my links below for my Discord, merch by Valk, and I will be catching you guys next time. I hope you have a good day. I want my Sisters of Battle. I wish I had that army back.